Okay, today we're going to talk a little bit about evolving traditional product metrics to grow positive social impact to grow positive social impact. And a little bit about me. This is me, Michael Enslow, Director of Product at Exygy. And this is me in my garden. So we're going to talk a little bit about my garden too and have a little fun with that. I know kind of in the post-pandemic world, we've lost sense of people's height, but I'm actually 6'2". And so you can get an idea that sunflower behind me is topping out a little over 12 feet tall. And so I'm standing amongst some of the things that I've grown in my backyard here in Berkeley. So our goals for today is we're going to plant a foundation of accessibility, cost, and time savings for our digital products. We're going to grow our approach to metrics that support your organization's mission and guiding principles for social impact. And then we're going to create an objectives-focused product roadmap that is supported by mission-aligned metrics to help people thrive. All right. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about our organization, my organization, Exygy, and tell you how what we do. So we are a design and build agency. Kind of used to be sort of focused in the Bay Area. Now we've kind of spread out. We've got some folks on the East Coast, folks in the center of the States. But our mission is we partner with social impact organizations to design and build technology that improves lives. And so part of what we need to do is figure out, like, are we actually really improving lives through the technology that we design and build? And that's really been our journey over the last several years. So some of the focus areas that we focus on is like affordable housing, healthcare equity, social safety nets. And we've really gotten an opportunity to work with an incredible group of organizations from, civic organizations like the City of San Francisco Digital Services, City of Oakland, some international organizations, CARE. We did an amazing project with a group in Tanzania. And so, yeah, it's just, it's a great place to work. We're really happy with the work that we do. But as product managers who work even for Exygy or work out there, it feels like our industry is having a little bit of a crisis. Like some of the ways we've measured success in our products haven't necessarily been really healthy and generated healthy outcomes for individuals. And so it's, I threw a couple examples up here about like Instagram and what Instagram is doing for teen mental health and their sort of mental well-being. But this is like daily we see examples of this. And I think it's easy to kind of put ourselves in an us versus them thing. We see Mark Zuckerberg on TV a lot, but I think there is also some acceptance of the role that we play. And that's where we need to kind of think about how the impact of the technology that we design and build on individuals, because we have to be accountable for it as well. So it's time to really evolve our metrics from focusing only on the growth of the organization, so growth of our organization, but we want to outwardly focus on supporting the people that are using the technology that we build for them. So stepping back, giving you a little bit of a history of product management here, the internet kind of came about. And once the technology got to a place where we could actually think about how people were clicking through websites, we had the birth of user experience design. So from that, get into sort of the search engine wars, and Google kind of came out on top. I think one of the reasons why they came out on top was Google Analytics. So from this combination of really getting great or better and better user experience and combining that with data, we really have the emergence of product management within design and development of technology. I think they've been around about 10 years or so. We have this framework called R metrics, so made popular by Dave McClure. And we'll look at them a little bit in some more detail, but these metrics are how we started quantifying how the features we were building, like how they were successful for the organization. But there's a gap sort of between those R metrics, and today. And that's what we're going to talk about. So one of the challenges I think within our space of social impact is I think there's a little bit of a resistance to thinking about the technology that we're designing and building sometimes as products. And we really need to think about it in terms of the product. There is a life cycle for every piece of software out there. It starts with kind of this inception. There is a kind of an introduction of figuring out like, who are my users, what kind of needs we're satisfying. And then once we sort of hit this product market fit, we can go into this growth space and then ultimately maturity and decline. And this applies to all software, whether it be like a SaaS application, whether it be a website, it doesn't really matter. They all sort of go through this life cycle. So the R metrics, I just wanted to kind of put them up there for people to kind of take a look at. And there's nothing inherently wrong with these, right? Acquisition of users is good. Activation of users, these are all good, especially, Tom was mentioning that they are a for-profit organization. Exygy is a for-profit organization. And so these kind of metrics, there's still a place for them. But notice something about them. They're really about benefiting the organization, right? They're benefiting the people who make the technology, not necessarily accounting for the people who are using the technology. So bringing us to today, how do we know that we're making the impact that we want to make with our technology that we design and build? Because if we think about impact, we might actually be creating the wrong kind of impact, and we want to be making positive impact, right? Car crash is not necessarily great impact. So we're going to start planting this foundation, and we're going to start with accessibility, cost, and time savings for our digital products. And let me get us back into my garden. And I live here in Berkeley, California. It's a lovely place to live. And I moved here in about 2010. And I started a garden in the backyard. It was kind of always been my dream. I used to live in New York City, and so I got to actually have a garden. When I started, I knew nothing about what I was doing. And I have this 4x8 foot garden box. I threw in some tomatoes and basils and corn, which is crazy. You can't really grow corn in Berkeley. Some people do, but it's very hard. It's not really the right climate for it. And everything's kind of crowded in here. And I bought and shipped in a bunch of compost from one of the local soil places. And this is what I have. And it was great, but I started with it, and I started putting plants in the ground, and I started learning from that. So that's where we are. And a great place to really start learning about creating this place where you can actually create digital products for people to thrive is really starting with what I call ACT metrics. And this is focusing on accessibility, how people access the information and services on either your website or your web app, cost savings, how much it costs, or how costly is the technology to operate over time, whether it be licensing fees or hosting fees. Time savings, does the technology save people's time? And this is a really big one as well. And that is a shift a little bit from the way we kind of traditionally think about having users kind of engage with the technology more, that we might actually think in terms of saving time, having them engage with the technology less. So accessibility isn't really a new concept for everybody. I think Jeffrey Zeldman's been talking about web standards for 10 or 15 years, but the reality is we're still in a place where we're not doing it very well. This ITIF study found that 92% of the federal government's most popular sites didn't meet the basic standards for security, speed, mobile friendliness, and accessibility. So even though we've been talking about it for a long time, we're still not doing it very well. So let me show you some examples of how we can do a little bit better. And these are not necessarily hard to do. In building technology that is accessible is so much easier today than it was when folks first started talking about web standards. So where we love to start is around like creating better color contrast, keyboard accessibility for vision impairment. Mobile is still a really a big one to focus on, because folks who are low-income folks, oftentimes this is the only way they might be able to access your online services. Language accessibility is another big one. And again, sort of the software today, it's a lot easier to support some of these technologies than it was 10 years ago or so. The example I wanted to show here is an affordable housing platform that we created for the city of San Francisco called Dahlia, and now we're kind of adapting it to a software called Bloom. And we're using here on the kind of the left side of this is a browser plugin called Wave that is free to use and super easy to use. You don't have to be a technology expert to do it. And it will scan your page on your website or your web app to show you where those accessibility problems are. It'll highlight the structured content that is not structured well for screen readers. It's going to highlight errors in color contrast, which is a really big one. Even people don't realize how pervasive vision impairment is. I mean, I'm 47. My glasses are kind of like, my screen is getting bigger and bigger. And so these color contrast things are really important for a huge population. So moving on to an example here that I really like, that we use quite a bit in the work that we do, is the US Web Design System, or USWDS. And they set out, well, I should say this, this was created in collaboration with the US government, some of the organizations within the US government, along with 18F, and they've kind of started about, I think, 4 or 5 years ago. So it's a work in progress, but it is really exciting, the work that it's being done here. Their mission is to make it easier to build these accessible websites for the government. And they've established this mission and then a certain set of design principles that really are focused on end user needs. So starting with the user needs, building their trust, embracing accessibility. So they're focusing on really establishing those principles for the end users. And the way that works out in practice is folks who are building sort of new websites for the US government, they can use this front-end framework, this design system, in order to create consistency from when folks are going from one site to the next. And this we've used for some of the work that we do for San Francisco, some of the work that we do for Oakland. And so it is really exciting. It's similar to maybe like a Bootstrap, but a Bootstrap that's really dialed in for accessibility and user needs. So when we think about cost savings, how costly is the technology to use over time? And here we focus on sort of these 3 areas around hosting, software licensing, and software engineers. And hosting is really something that has to be considered pretty early on when we're designing and building new technology, or evaluating, auditing once that technology is kind of like in the wild. So from a hosting sites can range from a few dollars and not be necessarily super robust and secure, on up to thousands of dollars a month that offer like more secure and robust solutions. So really factoring in those costs from the beginning is super, super important. The software licenses, here, it's like, what is that sort of build versus buy argument? Is the license to use proprietary software going to actually be more costly than if you were to build certain things from scratch? If you're building like data visualization dashboards like Tableau, we've looked at, and it's very expensive. It's great software, but it's very expensive. So really kind of digging in and evaluating that is important. From a software engineering perspective, there is the cost of just sort of the average cost of what it costs to kind of build these things, but it also, like, the technology itself comes into play. You may, like, factoring in like the availability of software engineers in a particular area is really important. I mentioned that work that we did for Care International in Tanzania. Internally, Exygy is kind of standardized on sort of a JavaScript technology stack that we use for our affordable housing platform. In Tanzania, finding engineers that could support that software long term, that did that technology, was very difficult. So we really honed in on agencies in Tanzania that could support it with the technology that was popular in that area, which happened to be a PHP framework. And so we ended up building out this dashboard in PHP. This example I have on the right-hand side is work we did with the San Francisco Unified School District. And for them, it was a process of kind of unifying all of their web systems under a platform that could support both sort of the main website as well as these individual school sites. When we started working with them, they were using a proprietary platform for hosting school websites that was really costly for them. And so that became a real metric of success for them to save money from that, the software licensing costs. From time savings perspective, we think of it in kind of different perspectives. One is like the ease of use, and this is for like end users or people who are actually using the software, how long they're trying to, or how long it takes them to complete the either the service in this case, or the thing that they're trying to do, the job that needs to be done. Now, what often gets overlooked too is the ease of actually maintaining the site or editing content. And these are the administrators that are keeping if it's a website, if it's a content management, their system, they're keeping that content up to date. With our affordable housing platform, it's actually the folks who have to build listings for those, for that platform. And then finally, on like the reduction of calls or in-person visits, I really like this example on the right-hand side. This is work that the Judiciary Council of California has done, and they've been real trailblazers in the area of self-represented litigation in the court systems, meaning folks who can kind of administrate their case online and not have to go in person. And that's a huge time savings for people. So they've created this really wonderful step-by-step process in their self-help guide that services stuff like name changes, marriage licenses, divorce, gender identity changes. And so it's just been a really great project that they've been doing. So that's all to say, with accessibility and cost savings, we must meet these basic needs of accessibility, cost savings, and time savings before we can expect to make meaningful, positive social impact. So that really has to be the foundation. So after we've established that, we built some of our soil, we're ready to grow an approach to metrics that support our organization's mission and guiding principles for social impact. So come on back into my garden, and it's about 2016. So I've been doing this for about 5 years at this point, and I've kind of broken free of that 4x8 bed. I'm starting to build the soil in the ground. And from that, I can kind of give up control of where those plants are going to be and get them in a place where they're really starting to thrive. So I've expanded out the beds. I've added flowers to the mix. I didn't know this before, but like when you add flowers, it brings in all these pollinators, and your yields just really increase. And I'm beginning to make my own compost. I'm actually beginning to grow the soil. I really want the hat that Andrew has, but I want it to say make compost, not war. So additionally, I'm starting to understand the sunlight. So that original photo of me, I'm starting to know how to kind of layer height by sunlight. So bringing it back into our product metrics, what we want to do is sort of refocus our metrics by aligning them on our mission and principles for social impact. So there's still a place for those R metrics, but they just need to be counterbalanced by those mission and principles. So we don't need to be afraid of using them. Tom mentioned that it works for a for-profit business. Exygy is also a for-profit business. We're a B corporation. And so it's kind of important to have that sort of balance. And so how do we get started with this? So first we need to align our product goals to those sort of mission and principles. And this is kind of a made up example, sort of loosely based on a civic organization. But let's say the civic organization's mission is design and build technology that improves lives. The principles within this organization are focused on equity, simplicity, and trust. And when we start kind of building this application, a lot of people, a lot of stakeholders will come to the table and will bring a lot of goals, like goals that they want. They want the site to be more readable. They want people to find the information. They want it to be transparent, mobile responsive. And certain things that maybe fit outside, like they want a department org chart listed, or they want a Slack channel built. When we start aligning these goals with those principles of social impact, then we can start to see which ones don't really fit very well. So Slack channel, if we don't really know how it contributes to equity or simplicity or trust, then maybe we have this way of just kind of putting it aside or putting it in the parking lot. While this is happening, when we're starting to build our design and build technology, we're also collecting all these features. So we're starting to build out this backlog of features, which that's fine kind of in this place here. But let's not get into features too quickly. So let's sort of gather them, kind of be ready to organize later. But we want to establish these goals first that kind of feed into the impact that we want to make. So our product goals should not be about control. Instead, they must connect to an existing habitat or community and contribute to it in a way that directly supports the well-being of individuals. So once we think about that, we're getting in a place where things can really start blooming. And from that, we can create an objectives-focused product roadmap that is supported by mission-aligned metrics that help people thrive. All right. It's now 2021 and things are really starting to thrive in my garden. I'm understanding how the light changes throughout the seasons. I'm even like, I'm Berkeley hippie here. Like I know how when we get full moon, it really impacts the growth of the plants. So here we go. That's where you get. I've dialed in the type of veggies that work really well in my climate. I have like this local community plant store up the road, and they have heirloom tomatoes that grow really great in Berkeley, and those are the ones that I get. And then I'm seeing all these native bees and pollinators and beneficial impacts, so there's really starting to get a habitat for things to thrive in my backyard. Now, again, bringing it back into our product management techniques, we've adapted a series of techniques from folks that are, pretty well known in the industry. And we've kind of just adapted them in a way that works really well for us. We love this Roman Pickler. He's got a great book that I can Slack out to you all. But we love doing this product vision board exercise that he has. And we do this at kind of the kickoff of new projects. We also love doing it, kind of redoing it on maybe like a quarterly release cycle. whatever cadence works best for you to reevaluate it. But it is great to kind of reevaluate. So what this does is it brings the stakeholders to the table, and stakeholders will all have their different perspectives. They're experts in kind of sort of specialize in sort of different fields. So it's really great bringing them all to the table in this kind of exercise. IDEO has a concept of sort of diverging and converging. At this stage, we're really wanting to be in this sort of divergent area where we're just sort of collecting all the ideas. So with this exercise, we make sure our product vision, well, first make sure we understand if everybody has kind of the same vision for the product, which is oftentimes fun. But then also making sure that product vision supports our organizational mission. We're getting a sense of our target group of users, their needs, or sometimes folks call them jobs to be done. And then in this product column, we really just want to collect all this sort of, again, sort of diverging, just kind of all these things that people want in the product, like what they think the product should do. So details, just sort of broad features and strategy, and any sort of relevant business goals or context. Like, are there some revenue goals or sort of budgetary goals that we should understand, or other sort of business context areas that we should account for at this stage. So there's a lot of stuff that comes out of this. It's sort of diverging. This is an example that came out of work that we did with the Lutzich Foundation. And there's kind of a mixture. Again, we've maybe brought in user research to the table, which is also always good to do beforehand. But at this stage, we might not know exactly if we're right on target with the groups of users. We'll know more and more as we get towards like that product market fit area. We have needs outlined here, product and business goals. And so it just looks like this big collection of information. And so how do we get from here to getting in a place where we can really think about metrics that are meaningful? We want to converge back on those principles we thought about earlier. So yeah, so all of those things that came from this maybe product column, if they're features, maybe we need to think about moving them to our backlog. If they're not really objectives that fit into these principles, then maybe they need to be pushed aside or refactored. But it is a good exercise to make sure, is everybody kind of being heard? And if it doesn't become a real sort of focus for the outcomes that we want for the product, for social impact, then we know why. Okay. So then we move on to a step. I'm sure probably a lot of people are familiar with the concept of OKRs, objectives and key results, within the organizational level, but I actually really like them almost more when we think about applying them to products and product metrics. And the reason being is they have a natural structure of the objective being really aspirational. And I think that's a lot about like the work that we do in social impact. We are really being aspirational. It gets us out of bed every morning. And so the OKRs and the key results, though, then counterbalance that sort of aspiration with measurable key results. And so if we tie these objectives back to those principles and apply them to the product that we're designing and building, we can look at them as our aspirational objective is to make the website promotes tech equity. The website is simple to use, and the website promotes trust in government. And we can create our set of key results that directly support those objectives. So for tech equity, all of our pages on our website is compatible with mobile devices. We reduce the average load speed by 20%. So you can see how this becomes kind of a powerful way to set your objectives and the way you measure success based on those objectives. So now how do we so we have this collection of product OKRs. how do we bring that into an actionable product roadmap? And again, kind of leaning back on this technique that Roman Pichler kind of introduced. He likes to think of, well, he kind of has, there's different times that you might not use a goal-oriented product roadmap, and sometimes you do. I almost kind of default, and Exygy almost defaults to this goal-oriented product roadmap. I like to call it objective focused. Sounds a little better for me. But this goal-oriented roadmap is a way to kind of break free of some of the approaches to product road mapping that you might find in like Jira or Asana, where they're really just timelines. They're not really like agile roadmaps where we think about epics and doing sort of parts of epics in this time and doing another part of the epic, another part of the epic. And so in here, this more like kind of grid view of your roadmap kind of puts aside the timeline for now. So we have the series of epics, or our epics for our product that we're building. Those become sort of the names, the goals, the dates when we're targeting them to be released, the goal that they're supporting. Then now we can start connecting this to our product backlog through the features. And then each metric is aligned to the goal and the features that are actually going to achieve those metrics. And I'm just going to blow out like one epic for us to take a look at how that looks like. So blowing out one in this example, so our epic, or sometimes people call it like a release name instead of an epic. So the epic is a civic service redesign, and we're targeting to release this in Q4 2021. Our objective that we're supporting is that website is simple to use. And then we have our series of features that support that. And then the key results are our metrics. So this key results are how we know that these features have done what we've set out to achieve. All right. So the other part of this that really constantly needs to be reevaluated is that we need to get continuous feedback from users. We always need to be ideating and prototyping, user testing, so that we get that feedback before we go into development. And doing these cycles, we can constantly check ourselves about, are these the right, are we actually hitting the needs of the users? Are we actually setting the right metrics that we need to do? So this is really hard work, based on kind of earlier conversation about like, what's in the news about, what our technology is doing to folks. We're not all doing this very well right now, and it is a work in progress. So I hope that this generates a lot of conversation around this. But if we start here, we start with foundation of accessibility. We're aligning to our desired product outcomes with organizational mission. We're going to leverage some of those existing tools. Like, don't be afraid to use those tools. And then again, just continually evaluate what you're doing with your users. And I think you're going to get closer to the mark. So kind of allow shout out to my garden. I've got some native Clarkia and lupine that are just, can't really see them, but there's a lot of tiny little native bees kind of zooming around in there. So thank you very much for listening, and I'll stay on and hopefully answer some questions.
While we wait, I just wanted to take a second. Thank you for sharing the beautiful pictures of your garden. It's like very gloomy and rainy in Chicago right now. So any bit of like nature and sun is like, ooh.
I'm originally from Seattle, so I hear the weather reports up there a lot.
Yes. Oh, I see one. I'll let you go ahead and take that.
Let's see. Question. Switch to the everyone. I'm sorry, I'm actually not seeing the question. Oh, here it is. Okay. Okay, so the question is, some government customers are coming from a non-agile perspective. How often do you encounter this? And how do you adapt this framework? Yeah, all the time. It's really a mixed bag. And what's hard too is it's hard to understand like how, like when you start working with new organizations, government organizations, to understand where they are in that sort of agile journey. When we started working with City of San Francisco for the Dahlia affordable housing platform, it was a really great situation where they had already like really got on the agile train, and so working with them, we kind of already were a little ahead of the game in terms of kind of speaking the same language and understanding the practices. Where we've worked with other groups that building software, designing software is not their specialty, and so all of these things are new. So we get into a place where it's like you probably maybe heard the expression "scrum to fall." No, wait, water scrum. I got it. Where the organization functions in a really waterfall, where you're trying to apply these agile practices. There's plenty of materials that says that doesn't really work, but that doesn't really stop us from like using agile practices and doing the best we can, and then trying to bring people along. I forgot the second part of the person's question. Maybe if that person can kind of repost the second part of their question.
I did put it in the chat.
Oh, great. How often do you encounter that? Okay, so yeah, all the time. And how do you adapt the framework for them? Yeah, so we do training. So I think the training it's good for them to kind of start understanding what we call things, but then the reality is like a couple hour training is more for us to understand where they are in that journey. And we adapt it in the sense like we may run Scrum kind of in the background and then kind of bring them in where it makes sense. Like they won't necessarily be part of the daily Scrums unless they're kind of more plugged into Agile. So next question is, how would you recommend a new product org to start out? As you shared, your process took iterations and years. What might we be able to take away to jumpstart our process? Certainly diving into what I call the ACT metrics, that accessibility, time saving, and cost savings. I think that's really the place to start. If you're a new org, I would ask yourself, like, does everyone really understand the mission? And then like how you achieve those goals within the organization, like what I was referring to as principles for the organization. Once you kind of establish those sort of pillars of principles, then it gets people to be able to start thinking about how they're achieving those principles. Like a mission is always like really lofty. And I think a lot of like startups, if you're referring to a startup, like they kind of don't know what their mission is, and they don't really know they're just kind of like, we're doing this for social good. Let's see, how do you think about product sustainability? What do you build in to ensure your solutions work post handoff? How do you measure ongoing use? Yeah, that's a great question. That's always sort of a big question or a big concern, I think. Like, we're a digital agency, so we've sort of built this thing that we get sort of emotionally attached to, and then we want to make sure that it's successful when we leave, like the San Francisco Unified School District, for example. So we thought about, when we were evaluating the content management system, one of the things we recommended for them was adapting a content management system that was the standard in San Francisco. And so they could always have this sort of abundance of resources for whether it be hiring sort of long-term folks to sustain it, or just like administrators getting training. So that was a big part of that process. Product sustainability. I think the example I mentioned it was a mobile app that we built for Tanzania. Having like paying us to support it long term as a San Francisco design firm was not really sustainable from a cost perspective. So we actually worked with them to build that capacity of that local development group that was like an eighth of a cost of us, which and we worked with them probably for about 6 months to just like really ensure that was going to be a successful engagement after we kind of checked out. Let's see. Can you give some examples of strategies you use to evaluate whether you meet ACT metrics or targets specifically for the accessibility and time-saving components? Yeah. I mean, one of the strategies we do is that becomes sort of part of our user experience kind of audit when we start working. And it kind of depends on the type of project it is. If it's kind of like a rebuild or a redesign where, let's say, it's going from like one platform to another, then kind of the best sort of sustainable solution is like, don't fix it on the old stuff. It may not be worth it. But if we're working for folks, like we're working right now with the city of Oakland, and we'll be working with them over the next like couple years and just tackling sort of one problem, not problem area necessarily, but like readability. That's kind of something that's just going to take time. And part of it is like surfacing the issues, working with them department by department to say like, hey, these are where sort of your web pages are having problems. Hopefully that answered your question. And then let's see, do you have any advice for those of us with social impact experience, but less product management experience specifically to build product management skills and ultimately get into product management for impact roles? Yeah, I'm hoping that this was a little bit of an introduction to that. I really love Roman Pickler's book called Strategize. It's a fun, easy read. There's a lot of really great materials. I think maybe one advice is to not, kind of what I mentioned around shying away from like all of those books, whether it be like Marty Keegan, Dan Olson, they're speaking in terms of like customers and revenues and engagement and stuff. And I think where the perspective I take of it is like, these practices can be adopted. They just need to shift from like always focusing on benefiting the organization to benefiting the users, the people that are using the software. Dan Olson has a great meetup. I think it's about once a month. It really took off since the pandemic. Because it was sort of in person in Mountain View, and I think it was a few hundred people. And now since the pandemic, it's kind of exploded into like several thousand people. And so it's a really great community. I recommend that. It's called I think it's called Lean Product Meetup. It's a great place. Really great speakers. Let's see, Brittany, did I cover all the questions?
You sure did.
Okay, great.
All right. Well, Michael, thank you again for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been really fun.
Yeah, great. All right.
Go plant some plants.
Well, right. Get a greenhouse this winter.
That's right.
Yes. All right. Thank you so much. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right. Thank you again to Greg and Tom and Michael for your time and your energy and efforts today. We really appreciate it. We will be taking the rest of the year off for events, and we will be coming back in January. with our Funding Impact Technology and Digital Transformation event. And then officially, Good Tech Fest is happening May 17th and 18th. It will be virtual, but we're kicking around a in-person portion too. So stay tuned. You can find all of our information on goodtechfest.com. We have speaker applications on there. And then also, if you're interested in being a part of our sponsorship, you can do that there too. So everyone, enjoy the rest of your day, and thank you again.